Dante's Divine Comedy tracks the movement of the protagonist through hell, purgatory, and the heavens. Along the way, we meet many deceased characters, persisting in the afterworld. They lack proper human bodies, but are nonetheless physical beings that at least look remarkably like they're made of real human flesh. The poem includes several points of focus on the nature of the posthumous body. In the Purgatorio, Statius provides a lengthy explanation of their formation and nature, and there is an ongoing program of embraces and scenes of physical contact between the damned or purging. Given this, it may be surprising to discover the apparent inconsistency in Dante's treatment of the corporeality of the beings in his work. For example, in Canto 2 of the Purgatorio, Dante tries and fails to embrace Casella, but that same Dante had been interacting with beings to no issue throughout the preceding book. This inconsistency seemed to demand a solution, as I was unsatisfied with the standard response, found in most of the major commentators, that Dante did not care to have a consistent physics governing his souls. My goal was to determine some of the rules of Dante's afterworld, and figure out why some beings are corporeal, that is, they can interact with other beings, and some are incorporeal, or unable to interact with other beings. Furthermore, I only took interest in the beings encountered in the Inferno and Purgatorio, as those in the Paradiso are materially quite different. I identified 3 possibly revealing data points, the sum total of which would have to answer the question, why are only some souls incorporeal, if there's an answer to find at all. The criteria were Dante's terminology, the interaction history of the beings, and elucidations on the nature of the posthumous body itself. The first investigation looked at what words Dante uses to indicate the beings he encounters, and determined if any of these terms track interaction capabilities of the indicated beings. The relevant words used by Dante, anima, ombra, spiriti, and alma, each seemed like they might have some definite meaning, and there were noticeable trends in their use. However, much to my disappointment, none of them tracked corporeality, as each was used without discrimination for both corporeal and incorporeal souls. The second point looked at the interaction data, and partitioned Dante's afterworld into 3 classes of people, based on whether a being demonstrated itself to be corporeal, incorporeal, or provided no indication either way. So I looked at scenes where the souls were explicitly described as in contact with each other, such as the envious, described as mutually resting on each other, or the wrathful of hell, who beat and tear at each other. Most inhabitants of Dante's afterworld had explicit, or at least implied, corporeality. All aside from the lustful of hell, the wrathful of purgatory, the fraudulent advisors, and the group of new arrivals to purgatory. Treating this as our set of interest, the next step was to see what characters in the comedy say about the physical nature of the bodies themselves, and determine if this set tracks anything relevant to those descriptions. We learn from Statius that the shade's body is made of the air that exists in whatever location the shade is inhabiting. The air moves with the soul, as does a proper body, though in the way a flame moves and follows its source, constantly sloughing off old air and incorporating new air into itself. From this we know that the air filling a circle of hell, or a terrace of purgatory, determines the nature of the bodies that reside there. Even if a soul moved from one location to another, as is the case in purgatory, we don't need to concern ourselves with that soul's history of movement, only its present address, to determine the physics governing its corporeality. Earlier in the story, we learn from Virgil that the shade's body is designed by God to allow for the suffering they are required to endure. This is perhaps obvious, certainly everything is as ordained by God, but it indicates that corporeality could very well vary by what is needed for the punishment felt in an area. With these conclusions at hand, a coherent story for the physics of corporeality seemed apparent. I propose that corporeality is used to attune punishment to the souls of the afterworld. In most situations, corporeality is useful in increasing the severity of a punishment. The punishment of hell's wrathful relies on the damned's ability to touch each other, and if the prideful were incorporeal, they would not feel the weight of the rocks they are bound to carry. But there are a few special cases when incorporeality makes the punishment more potent. To my judgment, The only such clear cases are the lustful of hell, where the purpose of their punishment is instability and lack of control. The wrathful of purgatory, who are supposed to be in a state of sensory deprivation within a cloud of dense smoke, and the fraudulent advisors, who are in part meant to be stripped of everything but their voice. These three cases also support the idea of corporeality being linked to bodily material in the air of a region. For these lustful and wrathful are the only people placed where the air is noticeably different. The lustful are immersed in a vortex, and the wrathful in dense smoke. The advisors are made of fire, so of course they're quite materially different than all the other shades we meet. The only aberrancy in this account is the new arrivals. Casella belongs to this group, so we know that at least some of them are incorporeal. I cannot give a definite answer here. My guess, and the story that I like at the moment, is that the excommunicated, who exist in the same region where the new arrivals are met, are also incorporeal. This is not indicated either way, but if they are, then the air of their region would render Casella temporarily incorporeal. Furthermore, the removal from physical contact seems a reasonable addition to the punishment afforded to the excommunicated, as it could serve as a physical manifestation of their separation from the church. This is, of course, speculation, but useful speculation, I believe. The account nicely explains some phenomena in the text and allows for a reframing of an unclear event.